some people ask me to talk about the recent statistics, job statistics. I think jobs is definitely in the mind of everyone, every citizens, because it's bread and butter, right? Uh, what do I think about over 94%? I think over 93, 94% of the jobs created last year goes to the foreigners. Okay, let me do the necessary thing first before I go into the issue per se. A quick one on the jobs statistics. Now, when I see that statistics, actually, I'm not that surprised, right? Basically, the fundamental question we have to ask ourselves, okay, if we have already full employment, almost full employment, 2.8% unemployment for residents. However, residents include PR. We do not know what's the percentage of unemployment among Singaporeans, Singapore citizens versus, and how many of the PRs are actually unemployed. In in a normal situation, you can only be PR if you have a job. Okay, so very likely the PR's unemployment rate is going to be very, very low, much lower than citizens' unemployment rate. That is my feel. I may be wrong, but that is actually logical conclusion. You do not need to have a job to be a citizen, okay? But you need a job to be a PR, unless you are uh, family members like the children of your PR's parents and all that, and you becomes a PR due to your parents, okay? So that's number one. So most likely, my view is Singapore citizens' unemployment will be much higher than the 2.8%. But we do not have the specific figures. This one have to go back to ask MOM for the specific figures. That's my guess only, right? Not a fact. Don't both me for that. So secondly, right, if you talk about even we have 3%, 4%, less than 5% unemployment for Singaporeans, and why are you not creating more jobs for Singapore's citizens? But 94% of the new jobs created goes to foreigners. Well, we have people who get retrenched. Now, unemployment figures is calculated like that, technically for economics or for Department of Statistics, since tax, we call it. If you are retrenched from a job, right, and you stop looking for a job, or after 6 months, right, you stop looking for jobs, you are considered out of the uh, workforce. Even you do not have any job after 6 months because you stop looking for jobs, you are not considered as unemployment. Okay, you must understand this, right? So the growth in workforce, the number of people graduated and all that from schools to come into workforce and all that, we must actually do an estimation. How many people got retrenched and get out of the workforce and not counted as unemployment, right? We do not have a stats, right? Frankly, I have not seen the stats myself, okay, for that. So this is one consideration we must look at. On the other hand, even when they claim that, oh, people got retrenched because last quarter, a lot of people got retrenched. Many of them found their jobs within 6 months, right? But what kind of jobs? There's no statistics on that. But by the look of the growing gig economy, gig means part-time lah, not full-time one lah, self-employment lah. Those Grab driver, right? Taxi driver are gig, right? Those Grab food delivery, food delivery jobs, right? All these are considered gig economy. Once they get into that job, they are not considered as unemployed, right? By the look of the size of this group of people and growing, okay? If it's growing, that means it seems that we have a serious problem here. It's more serious than unemployment. It's called structural underemployment. For example, if you have a professional who are graduate, who are trained in certain profession, like marketing. He was a marketing manager or director from foreign companies, and he got retrenched maybe at 40 years old, 40 plus years old, 45 years old, and he cannot find a job, and he goes into driving Grab, correct? And once he drive Grab, he's not considered as unemployed. But that job is not may not pay as good as their previous job, or may not use his skill set. That is called underemployment, right? So do we have a problem of a growing structural unemployment problems while we continue to create jobs for foreigners, right? Because naturally some MNCs company like their own people from their own countries, or they like younger workforce, right? And tends to retrench Singaporeans who are even 30 plus years old, 40 plus years old. Why? They have to go for reservists. 30 plus year old, 20 plus year old. They prefer people who do not need to go to reservist disruption from their jobs, right? From their career, right? So these are all the factors that we must look at before we come to conclude is a good sign or bad guy, right? Okay. So this is one kind of looking at job statistics. A lot of questions have to be asked in specific. I believe the PAP government have all the numbers, right? But they actually met up like residents and citizens. They put together and show a low unemployment rate. Of course, because we have 500,000, I think more than 500,000 PRs in Singapore, right? And our workforce is about, if I'm not wrong, our workforce is about 2 million people, 2 million plus citizens. So you put it in, you actually average out, okay? You actually average out. So it doesn't make sense. So you have to separate them and look at citizens. Why citizens? The first most priority of responsibility of a government is towards its own citizens, not foreigners, not PRs. Right? So you must give us not only residents unemployment or employment statistics, you must give us specifically our citizens' employment statistics, and whether we're suffering structural problems, structural underemployment due to the expanding gig economy, right? These are the important things that we have to look at. Right? I'm not saying that I'm right on all aspects, right? But I'm saying that ask PAP for the data. They should have the data before we can conclude how well is this country being run. Put it in a very simple way. If we can create so many jobs for foreigners, 94% of new jobs for foreigners, why are we still having people are forced into gig economy? Right? This is already a sign. And those who are people who are in Grab driver, uh, driving Grabs, taxi, or food delivery is expanding. That's not a good sign, right? That's not a good sign, right? So we must actually have a detailed study. Do these people actually choose to be a Grab driver or to go for a gig economy, or they're forced to, right? Do they meet their expectation, or do they meet their previous profession, their jobs? Are they retrenched and they are forced into it? No detailed studies have been released. I believe they should have done some studies about this because it's important. As a statistician and an economist, you should be very interested in this trend. And it's a worrying trend because gig economies, gig workers, they do not contribute CPF much. That is a cause of concern, right? It's a cause of concern because 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, you will find about the people, citizens, who may not have enough money for retirement, right? That should be a cause of concern for concern, right? So far, okay. Put these jobs aside, jobs issue. Okay, now I'm going to talk about carbon tax and zero carbon policy, because someone come and ask me after my last talk, what is carbon tax? What is a carbon zero policy? People doesn't people don't really feel the pinch because we are not tax what, we are not paying the tax what, this and that. Okay, you do not feel the pain, but actually you are indirectly being taxed, right? I explain. What is carbon tax? You have to understand the whole economic theory of externalities. I have touched about these externalities before. What are externalities? For example, if a factory on the upstream, right, producing textile, you use dye, right, and you want to save cost, so all the dirty water after dyeing the clothes, they just throw, right? They just pour into the stream, right? And downstream, there are fishermen who needs to make a living uh, by catching fish. But due to this pollution upstream, right, they lost their livelihood, right? So these are called externalities. The pollution caused by the factory upstream doesn't cost the factory owners anything. They just pour away the water. But the cost of this pollution are suffered by the fishermen downstream, right? So in normal circumstances, we'll fight and make the factory owners pay the fishermen because his pollution have caused their livelihood, their bread and butter, right? So this is called externalities. The pricing of externalities through this mechanism, right? So carbon tax, what is carbon tax? Right? It's the reverse, right? I tell you the reverse. For example, in Brazil, they have a large primary forest, right? Large forest, which forest is good in reducing carbon dioxide from the air. Carbon, when we are talking about carbon emission, the two main pollutant that causes higher carbon dioxide being released to the environment comes from power station. Power station that use oil, okay? And those cars which use petroleum or diesel, or industrial park that use petrol, right, to run their motors and all that. These basically are caused by energy. So in the greenhouse, so-called, actually it's not only carbon to do climate change that cause climate change. Beside carbon dioxide, there are so-called the greenhouse gases, GHG, right? You got methane and other gases, but that's minor. It's very difficult to determine. Carbon dioxide is very straightforward. Right? Now, they believe, or rather the scientists will tell you, or it's because of emission of excessive carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. We create global warming. Last time he said global warming, but sometimes some of the years have become so cold, so they change global warming into climate change, right? So climate change, it becomes extreme weather instead of just global warming, right? So the definition actually, the wording changed, but basically they considered carbon dioxide being produced like the upstream factory is a pollutant, and it affects everyone, anyone. But those people who are in Brazil, for example, those are developing countries. right? They have large forests. Carbon dioxide is being absorbed by trees, correct? Right? Photosynthesis and all that, and keep as the tree trunk. And when they die, it becomes goes to the earth and becomes fossil fuel. This one I actually briefly explained in my last talk, but I didn't go through it. So it's a natural process. So, but for this country who want to develop, they're under developing countries or underdeveloped countries. They will have to their own interest. They have to cut away the trees to build roads, to build factories, to build towns, and all that. Right. So the trees, cutting the trees costs nothing to them, right? But everything profitable for them to cut the trees, to sell the trees away, to throw the wood away and build their cities, develop their countries. So in order to encourage them not to cut the trees, right, to maintain these trees, we have to pay them, just like the factories have to pay the fishermen. But this is reverse lah, right? That means the fishermen pay the factories not to pollute, something like that, right? This way is the reverse. This pay these countries with the trees which which produce trees that take off the carbon off the atmosphere, right? So this is called carbon credit, right? Those who pollute, there's imbalance. Those who keep polluting will have to be punished, so-called, by paying these countries who have all preserved all the trees, right, for them to achieve net carbon emission. For example, if one country emits about 1 megaton of carbon each year, right? So there's a calculation. How many trees do you need, big trees, to actually absorb back this carbon dioxide from the atmosphere back into the earth, right? So you buy carbon credit from this 1 megaton of carbon credit. That means how many trees will the country have to prove that you have how many trees and to earn the carbon credit in terms of tons, right? So it pays. So there's transaction. So that this country will have net carbon emission because he bought the credit from a country. That means he pay a country, right, to absorb the carbon dioxide that is produced by the country, by its own country. So this is a very simple concept, right? Actually, it's very complex. Right. Whatever it is, it means that any countries that have a positive carbon emission, you can have a negative carbon emission. That means the number of trees that you have that can absorb the carbon from our atmosphere is more than what you produce. That means more than what your power stations, your petrol, your cars produce. That is called a net positive carbon emission. No, negative carbon emission. There are countries like that. Bhutan have a negative carbon emission. That means the number of trees, natural resources they have, actually are taking off more carbon dioxide off the atmosphere than what they have produced. Right? So this is carbon credit system. So Bhutan will have a lot of carbon credit that can sell to countries like us, which are net positive carbon emission countries. Right? So this is a concept. Now, this is not a compulsory yet. It's not compulsory yet. But according to the Paris Accord, the carbon policy, carbon zero policy accord signed in Paris, right? Each country will actually say that by 2050 or 2060 for China, that we will achieve net zero carbon emission. That means if we produce carbon dioxide, we will have to pay to buy carbon credit to cover the positive to make it zero. That's how it works. Now, the problem is this. How first, first, how do you ensure that the carbon credit you buy is legitimate? Really have trees out there to take off carbon dioxide from the air. Okay, that's number one. There are other ways of taking carbon off the air or off from the seawater. Now, the biggest absorber of carbon dioxide is actually the sea water. Okay, actually, um, the sea is very huge. It absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide into the water itself. So the concept is if you can take off the carbon dioxide off from the sea water, right, and transform it to this so-called solid form in terms of carbon, in terms of wood, in terms of whatever carbon compound instead of air, uh, instead of air, right? You will have carbon credit because when the water is less carbon dioxide, it can in return go back to the system and absorb more carbon dioxide from the air. Right? That is the concept. Okay, Singapore is a small country. Our contribution to carbon dioxide emission in the world is 0.1%. Right? 0.1%. We are only 14 in the Asia Pacific countries. How many Asian Pacific countries are there? Right? Not many. About 20. All right? About 20. Around the world, because our population is small, even if we have 6 million people, our carbon emission standard is actually very small amount. 0.1%. Who is the biggest polluter? Emit the most carbon dioxide? The two largest economy. That is USA and China. Right? Remember that. Huh? Now, this the carbon tax. After you understand what is carbon zero net zero emission policy, that all the countries, most of the countries are not all, that signed in Paris, the promise by 2050 we have a net negative, right? Net negative on net zero carbon emission. Either by you have technology to reduce your own carbon emission, right? Or you go and buy carbon credit from other countries to cover your deficit. Deficit means you're producing carbon dioxide, right? By doing so, right? Accreditation of carbon credit is difficult. That's why some people say that it's a scam. Right? Carbon credit system is a scam. That means any country can claim, oh, I have so many hectares of big trees, right? That can absorb how many tons of carbon dioxide from the air. So I have carbon credit and I sell it to you. 1 ton, $20 US dollars, right? $5 US dollars and all that trading system. But it's very long. There's no system, formal system right now, right? With proper system in that. Okay. So different countries like Singapore, we only uh, we only recognize certain countries of having certain carbon credit. But carbon credit, if you sell this carbon credit to one country, can you sell the same credit to another country? That is the luan part, right? Very confusing part. So that's why people say carbon credit is actually a scam, right? That's why they do not trust the system because it's not systematic. But that's another mind. A country can actually help, ideally, reduce its carbon emission by manipulating the consumption of petroleum or oil by imposing carbon tax. That's where carbon tax come from. But I can ask you, if the two biggest polluter, China and US, didn't impose carbon tax, why should Singapore impose carbon tax? We are kuching kurat, we are 0.1%, right? These two countries are actually quite huge emission. Let me double check. China carbon emission, right? Wow, okay. 27% of global greenhouse gas emission. 27%, we are 0.1%. Okay, I think US is about the same. And they are the two biggest polluters, right? US greenhouse, 6 billion metric ton, right? And that constitute about, let me see, oh no, 6 billion metric ton. Let me see, 15.8%, right, of the world emission. 14%. China is 29% now. United States 14%. Okay. So where is Singapore? 排行榜, okay, in terms of country. Singapore, wow, okay, all the way down. Wait, I saw it somewhere. Hmm. 61, number 61. Out of 180 countries. How much do we actually contribute to world carbon dioxide emission? 0.1%. We are number 61 in line. Even Malaysia have higher carbon emission than us, right? Hong Kong actually have lesser than us because Malaysia have a big population than us. Okay, they have about 23 million people. We have about 6 million. So it is a lot of factors will affect carbon emission. Population is one major factor. Then it comes to the construct. How developed is your countries? The more developed you have, the more shopping mall you have, the more electricity you use. Right? That's another factor. Okay. So I want to ask, why Singapore PAP want to impose carbon tax? We are tiny red dot. Okay, tiny red dot. Secondly, don't forget, everyone will be affected by carbon tax. Although you don't see it, wow, in your bill, your electricity bill or your water bill got carbon tax. Right? There are a few big companies or entities, industrial entities that was tax will impose carbon tax. The two major, of course, is what? Power station. The second one is water treatment plant. Okay? Then the other one was a uh, semiconductor uh, industry because they use a lot of electricity. Now, when your power station is being charged, initially in 2018 or 2019 when they first started it, it's $5 per ton of carbon. Now, let me transcribe this into monetary terms. That means before before it before this carbon tax was imposed, our electricity tariff was about 20 cent, 21 cent, 22 cent. After that, in 2019, November, the electricity tariff actually went up to 24 cent or more. Right? That's actually a 10% increase. Right? Of course, people will say because of this electricity, petrol price going up or down, or natural gas going up or down. Right? But this is so. Every $5 increase, I was told, of carbon tax per ton will translate to about 4% increase in electricity tariff, which affects everyone. But I don't believe so. I did a calculation. It actually should not be so. It should not be so. By my own calculation, right? A very rough calculation. If we follow PAP's roadmap, it says that this year they are going to increase their carbon tax to $25, if I'm not wrong. Okay, to get this right. Okay, $25, and by 2030, they're going to increase the carbon tax to $50 or $80 between these numbers. Why? I already said because they want the net carbon emission zero by 2050, and they want to reduce carbon emission by 2030, right? Start reducing it. That's why they have to up the carbon tax. But is it possible or not? Is it possible? I have said the contradiction is the amount of carbon dioxide emitted by a country depends on the size of the population. Right? It's very simple. You have more people, you use more electricity. Full stop. You have more economic activities, you have more shopping malls, more development of HDB flats or shopping malls, you use more electricity. You use more electricity, you emit more carbon dioxide. It is a no-brainer. Right? They try to control the consumption of petrol by fixing the number of vehicles. That's what they did now, right? Last year. And what happened? So COE prices went up. They try to mitigate this before the election comes, but this is not sustainable. Ultimately, the future quota that they grab here will expire, will actually use up, right? They will face a problem, right? It is not sustainable. The prices of vehicles, COEs will shoot up, right? Right? Will shoot up. Now, they claim, they think by increasing carbon tax, the purpose that they put very nicely, we hope that by increasing the carbon tax, right, all these entities will think of ways to reduce carbon emission. But how to reduce? Power station, how to reduce? Of course, you can do some technology advancement to reduce a bit, but the amount of emission ultimately will depend on the demand on the production of electricity. Right? So for the power station, it's very simple. We just transfer the cost, the additional cost of carbon tax to consumer like us. It's a no-brainer. So even when you do not see, even when you do not see, or you are being charged carbon tax for electricity bill, you are actually incorporated into it. And that is why it explained this. That's why when the natural gas prices went down, or even oil prices went down, you see the tariff doesn't go down, and sometimes it even go up. All right, why? Because of carbon tax. They increase the carbon tax, right? So The only ultimate impact is the quality of life of Singaporeans and the cost of living. Of course, like William says, can off aircon when at home, right? But I don't on aircon all day. I on my fan. So I have to off my fan. Then it will reduce my quality of life. I will be hot. I will be sweating all day long. Right? This is number one. If you want companies like power station to reduce emission, you must have an alternative technology to produce electricity to serve their customer. There's us, right? But there's none. You say, oh, by increase this carbon tax, people, these companies will think of ways of reducing carbon emission. But how much can that be done? It means that the supply and demand is inelastic, constrained by the technology, constrained by the demand. Right? That means the best tax imposed is actually on inelastic supply and demand. That means like necessity lah. Everyone need to eat rice. Right? I impose tax on rice. You lan, you have to eat. You have to buy. You have to pay the tax. Electricity is the same. Right? Unless you tell me there's another way of producing electricity without using natural gas. In Singapore, it's natural gas. It's not the petrol, the oil. Is there? At the moment, there isn't. And that is why they are thinking, they're actually thinking of having a nuclear power plant. I explained before, nuclear power plant depends on fusion or fission. Is a fission the traditional nuclear power plant? It is clean concept because it produces less carbon emission, but it is toxic. It produces toxic nuclear waste, which will last thousands of years before the this toxic waste can go away. So from one problem, you push us to another more serious problem. It doesn't work that way, right? So we have no plan. We have no plan. We have no ways of getting out of this tax. Put it simply. So whatever you increase our $5, $25, $50, we have to pay, right? Of course, people say, oh, we can install a solar panel and all that. Yes, ideally, yes, but you need the space to put. We do not have desert like what Saudi Arabia have. We do not have desert like the China has. The China have a Gobi desert. Right? We do not have desert like Australia have. Okay, they said they have a plan to have what solar panel put in Australia and transport all the electricity to Singapore through underground cable. But do you know such transportation, such cable will have loss, right? It's not efficient. Okay, and we cannot set up our own solar panel, right, at our home, correct? So there's no alternative. Yes, we can set up solar panel. Some town council have done that, but how much you can save? It's not practical. So we die, we have to pay the tax. Through what? For every $5 of carbon tax, you are going to pay 1 cent more. About 1 cent, by my calculation, is about 1 cent more. Or like in 2019, it was 2 cents, right? 1 cent more. Back in 2019, before they start the carbon tax, I think it was 22 cents or 19 cents, right? But of course, got variation due to petrol prices which is the natural gas which is packed on that. Very complicated calculation, right? But it's roughly about 1 cent more. That's my calculation. I may be wrong, but prove me wrong, right? I do not know how this uh, power station calculate. It will definitely translate to us. So if you are going to increase your carbon tax to $50 by 2030, or even $80, that's what, 10 cent more? More than 10 cent? If it's $80, that's what, 15 cent more? More than that? And what is percentage? 15 cent. Now our tariff is about 29 cent, right? 28, 29, depends, right? What is percentage? 20%. You are going to pay 20% more on tariff, electricity tariff, right? That is independent of how petrol price move. Do you feel scary? Our electricity already increased by about 7 cents since 2019, before the COVID. 7 cents. 7 cents out of 22 cents is how much? About one third, 30% already. And it's going to increase another 20% more. If I do not put this into perspective, you do not know how much more money you are paying for electricity. And needless to say, those who drive like me know the petrol price actually gone up, right? Last time it was $2 for my 92 lah, when I first bought my car, right? Right? It was about $2. Then COVID time dropped a bit, 190, right? Now how much? 280, 30%, right? Not that, okay, there are increase in oil prices, right? But the oil prices went up and came down, right? But part of the reason, I believe, this petrol price will go up again. Why? Because of this carbon tax. When the carbon tax is going to increase from $5 to $25, how many times is that? So $3 for my petrol is 92. Definitely cross $3, right? For per liter in the coming months. I like should say or can predict things one. These are all mathematics. Pure mathematics. Okay? Pure mathematics. Nobody will give you such clear idea what carbon tax can do to you, to all of us, in terms of cost of living. And there will be another round of inflation, trust me. Not because of this, increase with GST. GST is only 1%. Right? Not because of this. It's because of carbon tax. Right? Because AAP said it so. In tandem with their aim, right, to start reducing carbon emission, their plan by 2030, start reducing. They have to increase the carbon tax. They thought that by increasing carbon tax, they can reduce carbon emission. That's bullshit. Why? You can't. Basically, because you are continuing to increase population, there's no way you are going to decrease the carbon emission. No matter how much carbon tax you put in. Why? Because it's inelastic, remember? Demand is inelastic, right? And supply is inelastic in the sense that there's no alternative. There's no alternative source. You say EV vehicles, but EV vehicles also use electricity, which is produced by the power station. Correct or not? That is the serious implication. If you allow PAP to continue on this path, there's no return. Well, Muddy, I do not know where is the next GE. I have to make a call to the Prime Minister. You have his number or not? I don't have his number. But we predict it should be September, either it's September or November this year. Right? They try to prevent the carbon tax to be imposed right now. But after the GE, you will start you will start to see all this happening. And that is my prediction. And only you can stop it. Only you, right, can stop it in the sense that you can give them pressure by voting in more opposition. Who will question them on the rationale of putting up this carbon tax? When we are not the top polluter, and even the top polluter, China or US, didn't put carbon tax because they know if they are going to impose carbon tax, what will happen? Their industry will start to face higher cost of business and lose competitiveness, right? And their people will suffer higher cost of living and a lower quality of life in the end, right? This is madness. Okay, now, by the way, there are other ways for these companies like the power station to actually uh, reduce their carbon tax by buying carbon credit from other countries. Just now I was talking about this carbon credit thing, right? By recognized countries. So they can go to their countries and trade. Okay, I buy your carbon credit. Now, carbon tax and carbon credit is calculated per ton, right? Per ton. It means that if the carbon tax here is going to be $50, for example, but if the country is selling the carbon credit for 1 ton at $25, then they will save, so-called save money, save the carbon tax by buying carbon credit from these countries, correct? Correct. And by right, after buying the credit, they show the government down here, we already have a carbon credit. So you should not tax us so much. Reduce the tax, correct? But you know what? There's one rule that is imposed by PAP government. Yes, you can buy carbon credit from other countries, the recognized countries, but you can only offset, I think, only 1% or 5%. That means die you must pay me, right? Even with carbon credits. So what does this show? It shows that this so-called carbon tax is just wayang. The purpose is to let the government, the PAP government, want to collect more taxes. If carbon emission is your main concern, right? If this company can buy all the carbon credit from other countries, why not? Correct? Simple as that. But you have a restriction. You can only offset 1%. I think it's 1%. If I don't read wrongly, either it's 1% or 5%. Because too short a time, only 1 week to do my research, right? To do all this reading, right? And this is all everything about carbon tax and net carbon zero policies. And you know what? Workers' Party actually supported carbon tax, right? Simple as that. Okay, simple as that. First, first thing is totally unrealistic for PAP to set the roadmap, even for 2030, to start reducing carbon emission. Okay, because of the population growth policy they have. Remember, they are aiming for 10 million people by 2065. There's no way you can reduce carbon emission, absolute carbon emission, right? Secondly, the theory of all this climate change sounds nice, right? But when you come to execution, it's very difficult to carry out. And even the biggest polluter are not doing it that way. They impose carbon tax. We are the number 61. We are not the top 5, not even top 20, right? And the third thing, even when you put carbon tax into it, there's no alternative method to resolve alternative methods of producing electricity or allowing our vehicles to run on the road with less use of petrol or electricity. Okay? And you know what is the last and most important thing? If you still today, when you go and measure the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it is still 0.4% only. So the whole concept of climate change, based on the increasing carbon dioxide, is it valid? It's still a big question mark. Right? Why? Because, as I have said, the sea, the ocean, is the biggest absorber of carbon dioxide. And when this sea absorb this carbon dioxide, what will happen? All the seaweeds, all the organism within the sea, right? The seaweeds especially, when it grows, right? They convert the carbon dioxide also through photosynthesis, right, into solid matter, whether it's a seaweed or otherwise. So the whole science about climate change actually is it's not that straightforward, right? Not that straightforward. So we are actually in politics, right? The American politics, they also say this leftist woke mentality. Wow, when they talk about climate change and all that, they are very aggressive. But look, I am a data man. I look at statistics, right? Because only data don't bluff people one. When I was young in 1980s, there are dooms prediction already. By 2020, wow, the ice will melt in the North Pole and the South Pole, right? And and the water level will go up by how many cm and all that. But now it's 2024. Did it happen? It didn't. There must be something wrong with that prediction. And that prediction is based on so-called the scientific data or scientific simulation. But it didn't happen. Why? Yes, it's fear mongering. Because they have actually overlooked the ocean is the biggest absorber of carbon dioxide, so to speak. Right? So there's a big debate about these models, this scientific climate change science. And the worst part is a lot of people are very skeptical about this carbon credit stuff They always think that it's a scam, right? But look, how they determine. For example, Sri Lanka, you have great mountains of tea leaves. Tea leaves also got photosynthesis, right? But then it cannot be counted as carbon credit, it cannot be considered as carbon credit, cannot use as carbon credit. You know why? Because the logic is this. The trees must be a certain height, then it can be counted as providing carbon credit. That is how absurd it is. Right? But tea leaves, tea plants have got so many leaves, doing photosynthesis so much. Every time I visit Sri Lanka, all the tea plantation is so nice. The air is so refreshing because of all these plants. And they say that bopake cannot be counted as carbon credit. How absurd can it be? And you call that science, right? But I'm going to contest in Tampines, right? I'm telling you, I'm going to contest in Tampines, right? So you must have people who talk sense, not just theory, not just economic theory, and based on uh, unwholesome science about climate change or global warming. Right? In nature, it always have a methodology of balancing itself. Right? And I do not think we have enough wholesome knowledge to actually understand it yet. But we have government jump on an opportunity when our contribution to carbon emission is so small, 0.1%, right? When our contribution to the whole system is so small, and we start to have government that jump on it and say, oh, we must impose carbon tax, which will increase by tenfold within the next 5 years. After this election, they will increase it tenfold by 2030, at least tenfold actually. From $5 to $50 or even more, $80. And do not think that this have nothing to do with you. It will affect your electricity bill, it will affect your public transport fees, and it will affect your water bills as well. Because PUB, those are water treatment plants, are also imposed carbon tax. Why? These are inelastic demand. Definitely, they will impose on tax on have elasticity one. Okay, and that is so. Spread the message of what carbon tax is all about, and this will be the key issue for the next election. Nothing to do with reserve, how to use reserve. No, it's about carbon tax, the quality of life, or in the cost of living in the years to come. If you give them all the power they need, they will carry it out, and every one of us will suffer. Thank you for watching. Good night.